So today I will show you how to hack a Wi-Fi network. This is day 11 of the Advent of Cyber by TryHackMe, which is a series of challenges they run every Christmas. And I can't believe it's Christmas already. If you're new here, you can call me Unix Guy. I create YouTube videos that help individuals from all over the world land their first cybersecurity job in the fastest and cheapest way possible. So make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Let's go! Now, as for the storyline, the much-awaited SOCMAS of Wareville Town is just days away, and Glitch, the unsung hero, is closing all the doors to Maya malware's malicious intentions one by one. However, there is still much more to do. McSkiddy took a thoughtful breath and said Maya can still find a way. Glitch smiles confidently and says, I think I know the last technique he relies on to get into the networks. McSkiddy stands up, clears her chair with a surge of excitement and says, let me guess, it's a notorious way to get into a network. A Wi-Fi attack? And Glitch nods decisively. Exactly, let's be one step ahead of Maya. Now, our learning objectives for today is first to understand what Wi-Fi is and explore the importance of Wi-Fi to an organization, which most of you are probably familiar with. And then we learn the different types of Wi-Fi attacks. And finally, my favorite part is the WPA and WPA2 cracking attack. But first, we need to launch AttackBox. After we launch AttackBox, we need to start the machine. And once you start it, just give it some time. I'm fast forwarding here in the video. But you will see that the IP address will appear next to the SSH command. And then we can simply SSH to our virtual machine. Now I'm gonna have AttackBox in a full screen mode just to make it easier for you to read. We'll quickly go over some theory that you will need before you dive into the challenge. If you're watching this video, you probably know what a Wi-Fi is. In fact, my laptop here is connected to a Wi-Fi network. In your house, you probably have a Wi-Fi network, and at your workplace, you probably connect to a Wi-Fi. Usually, the Wi-Fi has a name like home office or your company name. In the networking world, we refer to this as the SSID, and usually you need to enter some kind of password, which is what we refer to as PSK, which stands for pre-shared key. Usually, your laptop or your phone, they have a wireless network interface, and that interface connects to a router. We refer to them as wireless access point. So that's how you connect to that SSID, and you provide the password or the PSK to connect to the Wi-Fi. Now, Wi-Fi are notoriously known to be vulnerable to cyber attacks. In fact, one of the most common ways to break into an organization is to drive really close to that organization and try to get that initial access by compromising their Wi-Fi. Now, the lesson today has given us 4 types of Wi-Fi attacks. You don't need to know all of them, just the 4th one is the one that we will use in the challenge. But just to quickly run through them, the first one is the evil twin attack. This is when the hacker creates a fake access point that usually has a similar name to the real access point. For example, if your home network is called home Wi-Fi, it will have a name like home Wi-Fi with 2 eyes or home Wi-Fi 2. And then the attacker will try to disconnect you from the Wi-Fi by sending what we refer to as the authentication packets, just to try and trick you to disconnect from the real Wi-Fi and connect to their evil twin or the malicious access point. The second type is called the rogue access point. That's the one that I usually see in the industry. This is where the hacker is really close to the network or perhaps even inside the network, and they set their rogue Wi-Fi that looks exactly like the real one. Usually those rogue Wi-Fis look really authentic because they'll have a good Wi-Fi strength and they can really trick you into connecting to them. The third one is the WPS attack. The WPS setup was created because some people didn't like to type a long password, so instead they created an 8-digit PIN to make connection easier. And as you may have guessed, that has proven to be a terrible idea because through brute force attacks, which is simply trying so many password combinations until you can guess the password, attackers are easily able to break that 8-pin digit code, which is why in the real world we always recommend really long passwords or even better passphrases. The final type of attack is the WPA or WPA2. This is the one that we're using in today's challenge. WPA or WPA2 uses strong encryption algorithm where both the client, which is your laptop, and the server, which is the wireless access point, they perform what we refer to as the 4-way handshake, where the server will send a challenge to the client, and then the client encrypts that challenge, which is the encryption key or the password in this case, and then it sends it back to the server, and then the server will be able to verify whether that password or PSK was correct or not. Now, this is vulnerable to a type of a man-in-the-middle attack where the attacker can basically sniff that encrypted challenge and then perform brute force attacks against that encrypted challenge. challenge text to try and determine that PSK or password. So as for today's challenge, this diagram that I put on the screen described it nicely. So we will be the attacker, and then on the network, we will turn our wireless network interface into what we refer to as monitoring mode. So our wireless interface will be sniffing traffic from the network. The idea is we need to sniff that initial challenge in the four-way handshake to be able to capture that challenge and perform brute force attack. Now, usually as an attacker, when you go into the network, the clients will be already connected to a router. So what we do is we send the authentication packets to disconnect that client from the server. This will force the server to try to establish that four-way handshake again. And that's how we sniff that challenge and we break that password. So enough of all this theory. Let's start putting this knowledge into practice. So the first command that we will do is iwdev. You do this in the local machine of the attacker, which in this case is called glitch. This command basically shows us our wireless interface, our wireless network interface. In this case, it's called WLAN2, that's the name. And then we have ADDR or address. That's basically the MAC address or the BSS ID of your wireless interface. It's a unique identifier of that wireless interface. And more importantly, we have the type. The type is managed. Managed is the normal mode of operation for a wireless interface. That's when it's used to simply connect to a Wi-Fi. Now, as attackers, we need to change it to monitoring mode to be able to sniff that traffic. But before we do that, let's just scan our network to see if there is a wireless access point. So we simply type sudo iwdev WLAN2, which is the name of our wireless interface, and scan. And there it is. We can see the BSS ID, in this case 02 and all 0. This is typical for wireless access points to have all zeros. It's not a rule, but it's really common. And also it has a name, SSID. This usually tells us that this is indeed a wireless access point. Now we also see it says RSN, which is what security is implemented on that wireless access point. And I could quickly tell it's WP2 simply from the line that says Authentication Suites PSK, which is the pre-shared key. Other indicators are also CCPM, which is also typically used when the wireless access point uses WPA2. So let's go ahead and put our wireless interface into monitoring mode. So we simply need to set the link down by typing IP link set dev WLAN2 down, and then we can change the mode into monitoring mode by the command iwdev WLAN2 set type monitor, and then we simply bring it up. And if we perform the info command again, we can see clearly that the type is monitor. So our wireless interface supports monitor mode. Sometimes some interfaces don't support that, so it's something you need to look out for. So now we need to have two terminals open, one for us to sniff the packets on the network and the other one to execute commands such as deauthenticating the clients that's connected to force it to reconnect, and then we can sniff that traffic successfully. So the first command that we need to run is aerodump-ng, and as you can see the output, this shows us the wireless access point that we already know is on the network. You can clearly see the BSS ID of that router and the SSID or that network name, which is malware m_ap. So we want to disconnect that sniffing and we want to target it specifically to that router, because in the real world there's usually so much noise on the network and so many other clients are routers. So we need to narrow down that sniffing. Therefore, we need to supply options to the sniffing command to tell it to only listen to that particular wireless access point, and we want it to capture that output and send it to a file, because we know that file will contain the encrypted data with the PSK, and then we can brute force that file. We don't want it to just display the output on the screen. So we supply the channel name, which is 6, and we supply the BSS ID, and the output, as you can see on the screen, it's the same router, it's listening to it, and we can verify that one more time through the BSS ID of the router and the name of the router. But this time what's different is that it only listens to that router and the output is captured on the file that we specified. Now allow it 1 to 5 minutes and it will show us which clients are connected to that router. And as you can see, we can see one station, it has a different BSS ID than the router. So the difference is there is a 01 at the end. So it's 02, 00, 00, 00, 01, 00. So we know that's a client connected to that router. So what we need to do next is send the authentication packet to make it disconnect and force it to re-establish that four-way handshake where that data encrypted with the BSK will be exchanged, and then we can brute force it. So the command to do that is airplay-ng. So -a is the router's BSS ID and -c is simply the client's name, and then we supply that router name. And as you can see, it says directed deauth, which stands for the authentication. This tells me that the authentication was successful. And as you can see on the screen, we can see evidence of that handshake occurring. This tells us that in the file where we captured that output, somewhere in this file, there is a captured challenge that's encrypted with PSK that we can simply brute force to get that PSK password. So as this is a beginner challenge, as you can see, all the commands are ready for us to use. So if you want to learn more, you can simply go and learn about the particular commands in your own time. So we'll simply execute the aircrack command with all the options in it, and it's on the screen. It simply says here the key is fluffy/champ24. You won't be able to see these answers on the web page, but if you execute these commands, you'll get this output that I'm showing you on the screen. And now as hackers, we can simply use that PSK and connect to that wireless access point as clients. So imagine if you're trying to hack into a company, now you're able to connect to their own Wi-Fi and you can do so much damage from the inside. Which brings us to the end of the challenge. So let's answer the questions at the end. The BSS ID of the wireless interface, this is easy. If you scroll up, you can find it, which is 02, all zeros, and then 02 before the end. What is the SSID and BSSID of the wireless access point? Again, we scroll up, it's really easy to copy paste. So the SSID is malware m_AP and the BSSID is 02 and then all zeros. And what's the BSSID of the wireless interface that's already connected? So that's the station or the client that was connected, the one where we perform the authentication on. So it's 02, all zeros, and then 01. As I said, I'm too lazy to type, so I'm just going to be copy pasting them on my answers. And what's the PSK? It's fluffy-champ24, and that's the end of it. Well, I hope you enjoyed the challenge. Please let me know if you enjoyed the challenge in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.